What if everything we've ever known about human history is only the latest draft in a story far older than we can imagine? Earth is ancient, 4-5 billion years old, and yet humans, modern humans, have existed for only 300,000 of those years. So what came before us? Was the planet barren, empty, or is there something we've missed? Something buried beneath our feet, erased by time, and forgotten by history. In 2018, two scientists dared to ask a question that made the world uncomfortable. Were we truly the first industrial civilization on Earth? Or could there have been others, millions of years ago, whose traces have long been swallowed by the Earth itself? This is the story of the Silurian Hypothesis, a chilling thought experiment, a scientific mystery, and perhaps the key to unlocking a forgotten chapter of our planet's past. Because if they were here before us, where did they go? And more importantly, what happens to us next? Picture this. Earth is 4-5 billion years old today. The earliest human ancestors appeared just 7 million years ago, and modern humans, only about 300,000 years old. Now do the math. If Earth is a vast library of time, our entire existence barely fills the final page. So who or what filled the chapters before us? Was Earth empty all along? Silent continents, lifeless oceans, waiting for us to arrive and write the first words of civilization? Maybe. But that idea only held weight until 2018. That year, two scientists made a proposal so bold, it shook the very timeline of human history. They called it the Silurian Hypothesis, and their question was terrifyingly simple. What if humans weren't the first advanced civilization on Earth? What if, hidden deep beneath our feet, are the chemical ghosts of a species long gone? A species with cities, power grids, agriculture, but no trace left behind, not even bones. Welcome to Secret Origins. Today, we dive into a theory that challenges everything we know about who we are, and how alone we really are on this planet. Because if the Silurian Hypothesis is true, then we may not be the pinnacle of civilization. We may just be the latest chapter in a much older story. A story already buried beneath rock and time, waiting to be read again. We thought we knew our place. For centuries, humanity saw itself as the culmination of evolution, the most advanced, the first, the only. But in 2018, that belief was challenged in a way no one expected. Two scientists, Adam Frank, an astrophysicist, and Gavin A. Schmidt, a climate scientist at NASA, posed a radical question. What if humans were not the first industrial civilization on Earth? They were not writing fiction. They were not chasing conspiracy theories. They were asking a serious scientific question. If an advanced civilization had once existed on Earth millions of years ago, could we detect its traces today? Their answer was unsettling, because they realized something most of us never consider. Earth forgets. We think cities are permanent. We believe monuments stand forever. We assume plastic will outlive us all. But Earth has other plans. Imagine this. Humanity disappears today. No warning, no survivors, just silence. Within decades, forests reclaim our homes. Within centuries, steel rusts and concrete crumbled. Skyscrapers fall. Bridges collapse. Plastics degrade. Radiation fades. In 10,000 years, nature wipes the surface clean. In 1,000,000 years, there is nothing left. No signs, no memories, no proof. And that is today's world. Now imagine a civilization that lived 50 million years ago. What would remain of them? Would we even know they existed? This is the core of the Silurian hypothesis. The idea that an industrial civilization could have risen long before us and vanished without a trace. Not because it was erased by war or fire, but because Earth itself is relentless. Continents shift, mountains rise, oceans swallow cities, time buries all things, and the geological record only preserves fragments. Frank and Schmidt named their idea after the Silurian period, a time over 400 million years ago. They also nodded to the Silurians in the Doctor Who series, a fictional reptilian species said to live before humans. But their real purpose was to test a deeper idea. If a civilization had existed millions of years ago, and built machines and burned fuel and changed the planet, would we see any of it today? And if not, how could we even begin to search for it? They weren't looking for ruins. They weren't digging for tools. They were chasing shadows in the chemistry of rocks, because while Earth erases structures, it sometimes keeps whispers in stone. Tiny shifts in carbon isotopes, sudden spikes in temperature, anomalies in the fossil record. These are not solid artifacts. They are scars, and scars can be read. So the question becomes sharper. If an ancient civilization burned fossil fuels, would it leave behind a trace? If it used nuclear power, would isotopes remain? If it altered the climate, would we see it in the sediment? Frank and Schmidt weren't claiming such a civilization existed. They were showing that it could have. And more disturbingly, they showed that we might never be able to prove it. Because if a global industrial society had lived and died before us, Earth may have already swallowed its story whole, leaving behind only the faintest hints, and maybe not even that. So we're left with a haunting idea that we may not be the first, that we may not be alone in Earth's history, that our chapter might just be one of many, already buried, already forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered. So if Earth can erase civilizations, how would we ever know they existed? Frank and Schmidt asked this not to entertain science fiction, but to spark a new kind of investigation. Instead of looking for temples or lost artifacts, they turned their attention to a far more silent witness, the very ground beneath our feet, a place where time does not only bury but also remembers. Earth can crush concrete and swallow entire cities, but sometimes it leaves behind traces, not visible to the eye, but embedded in atoms, in chemistry. If an ancient industrial civilization once existed and burned fossil fuels like we do today, it would have altered the carbon ratios in the atmosphere. Specifically, the ratio between carbon-12 and carbon-13. Industrial processes increase carbon-12. This shift can be preserved in geological sediment layers. If scientists find a layer of rock millions of years old with a similar isotopic anomaly, the question must be asked: what caused it? And it goes further. If they practiced agriculture, if they used synthetic fertilizers, there would be a measurable change in nitrogen 15 levels in the soil. This too could linger across millions of years, a quiet chemical whisper from a civilization long gone. And if they harnessed nuclear energy, if they built reactors or even waged nuclear war, they would have left behind artificial radioactive isotopes, such as plutonium or iodine. These substances do not appear naturally. They only emerge from nuclear reactions. They have half-lives so long that if they were produced millions of years ago, they might still be found today. In this way, Frank and Schmidt shifted the entire search, not from stones, but to chemistry, not from ruins, but to residue. They offered a new lens to read a civilization that no longer speaks. But here comes the difficult truth. Many of these chemical signs could also be caused by nature. Volcanic eruptions can release vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Natural climate shifts can change nitrogen and carbon levels. Even nuclear reactions can occur without intelligent design. This happened in Aklo, Gabon, where the world's first known natural nuclear reactor formed nearly 2 billion years ago. No cities, no tools, just uranium, water, and time. So even if we find unusual chemical signatures, we cannot jump to conclusions. They may not point to intelligence. They may be random. They may be natural. And that makes the question harder, not easier. Still, one thing remains deeply unsettling. If a civilization like ours would leave behind so little after just a few million years, what makes us think we would ever notice if one came before? Imagine a scientist or an alien explorer visiting Earth 10 million years from now. Would they know we were ever here? Or would they too be forced to propose a hypothesis? A theory about a civilization that once ruled this world, but vanished, without a trace, without a goodbye. If chemistry holds secrets, then one event might hold the biggest secret of all. It is called the Paleocene, Eocene thermal maximum, or simply the PETM. It happened around 56 million years ago, and it is one of the most extreme global warming events in the history of the planet. During this period, global temperatures spiked by at least 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. The Arctic, once frozen, reached 20 degrees. Oceans turned acidic. Carbon flooded the atmosphere, and Earth's ecosystems changed in ways we still do not fully understand. Scientists agree that the PETM was a massive climate event, but they still argue over what caused it. Frank and Schmidt stepped in with a bold idea. What if the PETM was not just natural? What if it was the result of an ancient industrial civilization? One that existed long before humans, one that burned fossil fuels, released carbon, and caused a planetary shift so intense it's still visible in the rocks today. This was their final card, their most daring proposal. If humanity's actions are causing climate change right now, and we see similar patterns in the PETM, then maybe we are not the first to do it. It is a disturbing parallel. Today, we are in the Anthropocene, a new geological epoch defined by human activity, carbon emissions, mass extinctions, climate breakdown. Now look back. 56 million years ago, carbon surged. Temperatures rose. Ecosystems collapsed. Could it be the same story, played by different actors, at a different time? But science demands more than questions. It demands answers, and the PETM does not give us enough. For one, the rate of carbon release during the PETM was slower than it is today, much slower. If an ancient civilization had caused it with industry, the spike should have been sharper, more abrupt, more like what we are seeing now. Second, no archaeological or fossil evidence has been found from that time period. Nothing to suggest tools, structures, bones, or intelligent life. And third, natural explanations still hold weight. Volcanic activity could have released that carbon. Melting permafrost could have destabilized methane. Massive wildfires could have changed the atmosphere. All of these processes are documented. All of them are natural. All of them are possible. So the PETM remains a mystery, a powerful one, but not proof. Still, it haunts us, because if it could happen once, it could happen again. And if it was natural, then nature is more volatile than we thought. If it was artificial, then perhaps someone came before and made the same mistakes. The Silurian hypothesis doesn't claim to have the answer, but it does one thing perfectly. It reminds us that we are not at the end of history. We are just the current chapter, and we have no idea how many pages came before. When we think of prehistoric life, we imagine chaos, creatures roaring, flesh and fang, survival without strategy. But what if we were wrong? What if some dinosaurs were not just beasts? What if they were builders in the making? For decades, scientists assumed dinosaurs lacked intelligence. The stereotype was simple: big bodies, small brains, no potential. The Stegosaurus, for example, had a brain no larger than a walnut. So most experts wrote off dinosaurs as incapable of higher thought. But that view has changed. New discoveries suggest that some species were far more advanced than we imagined, and one of them stands out: the Troodon. The Troodon was small, fast, bird-like, but its brain-to-body ratio was higher than almost any other dinosaur. It had binocular vision, grasping hands, and signs of complex behavior. Some paleontologists believe it hunted in coordinated groups. Others think it may have passed knowledge between generations. These are not the actions of a simple animal. These are signs of intelligence. And then came the idea that pushed everything further. In 1982, paleontologist Dale Russell asked a dangerous question. What if the asteroid never hit? What if the Troodon had survived? What would it have become? He created a concept called the dinosauroid, an evolutionary projection of the Troodon. It had large eyes, three-fingered hands, an upright posture, and a brain capable of abstract thought. It looked uncannily like a humanoid. Russell admitted it was speculation, but the implications were enormous. Because if one species could evolve intelligence once, it could happen again, or it could have already happened before us. Some scientists dismissed the dinosauroid as fantasy, but others saw it differently, not as a prediction, but as a reminder that intelligence is not exclusive to mammals, that consciousness is not unique to humans, and that evolution can take many paths. And Troodon wasn't the only one. Recent studies on Maiasaura dinosaurs show even more surprising behavior. They returned to the same nesting sites year after year. They built social communities. Males guarded the nests. Younger members foraged for food. It was cooperation, it was structure, it was a system. No stone tools, no writing, but something deeper. A pattern of intelligence hidden behind reptilian eyes. If the Troodon or Maiasaura had continued to evolve for millions more years, what might they have built? Cities, technology, culture. And if they did, would we even know? Or would their machines have long since turned to dust, their buildings swallowed by shifting plates, their language lost without trace? Again, we return to the haunting truth. If it happened, Earth would have buried it, and we would be left staring at fossils, unaware of what they once dreamed. Maybe the past is stranger than we think. Maybe dinosaurs were not the end of the story. Maybe intelligence came in many forms, and maybe some left no skeletons behind. In the early 2000s, Japanese biologist Toshiyuki Nakagaki conducted an unusual experiment. He placed a single-celled organism, a slime mold, into a maze. At the opposite end, he placed sugar. The mold had no brain, no nervous system, no eyes, but it moved with purpose. It explored, it learned, it found the sugar. This organism solved the maze without thought, without language, without neurons. What if intelligence is not what we think it is? What if awareness can exist without consciousness? And what if the first civilization on Earth was not made of flesh and bone, but of something older, something quieter, something fungal? A civilization that grew underground, that spread through root systems, that communicated chemically, and when its time ended, it faded without a trace. It sounds impossible, but so did electricity once. So did space travel. So did the idea of humans flying. Then we look at the pyramids, not just in Egypt, but in Mexico and in Cambodia and in Italy and in Sudan, thousands of years apart, separated by oceans, but built with eerie similarities. Massive stone structures aligned to stars, perfect geometry, no mortar, no mistakes. We are told each was made by different ancient cultures. We are told it is coincidence. We are told not to ask too much. But what if the truth is older? What if these pyramids were not original creations, but reconstructions, replications of something they saw, or remembered, or were told? What if there was a time before time, a builder before builders, a civilization that shaped the world long before us, and passed through myth into silence? We don't have answers, we only have questions, but sometimes the questions are more important because they keep us looking. The Silurian hypothesis is not a theory of proof. It is a challenge to our assumptions. It asks us to consider a world where memory is geological, where history is fragile, and where even time forgets. Maybe we are not the first. Maybe we are just the first to remember. And if that is true, then somewhere in the rocks a fingerprint still waits. Not of bone, not of tool, but of presence, waiting just beneath our feet.